right? Let's take a step back. And I think we can backfill the 800,000 from
But
a
I
couple.
think what you're saying, Ed, is it's not an all or nothing from one entity. It's three entities.
Right.
City, the
There's-
county, and these agencies, because we have LDC and
We can
IDA.
backfill that.
The challenge at this point from the Y is that they've got till next week.
That's my point. That's why we've got to make them whole, this project whole almost today.
Right.
To get that contract signed.
And the reason I asked Don to join us today is that if the LDC does support the project financially, we would have to make a commitment up front, knowing what that max might be. But then my intent would be to go to the Watertown Trust to split that with us. But obviously they haven't met yet, so I didn't want to surprise Don by having him reading the paper that I proposed that. So the idea is that we would, whatever we decide to do as cash, that we would, and Don can't speak for the board, but at least, I would approach them and request that they split that part of it with us.
So for those joining us, we just came out of executive session. We're discussing financials of a particular project, and I was gonna have Dave Zambia kind of restate what we need to talk about here publicly.
So-
Don,
so-
it's Don, yeah, Don's right. You're kind of
So-
hiding.
So now we're back in the executive session. What we're talking about is whether the LDC board is willing to consider some financial assistance to the YMCA project.
For that 880,000, which is crucial to the project's financial
Right.
success.
And what I was thinking was, would they consider $400,000 with, and that would be conditional upon if they got additional funding down the road this fall, that they would then not need that money. This is not money that they need up front. They just need to know it's there for them to make a commitment to move ahead. At the same point, if we decide to make that $400,000 commitment, at least so they have a commitment as to why is moving ahead, hopefully, I would approach the Watertown Local Development Corporation Board next week and see if they would split that with us.
I have a question, really kind of to Don on this project. This is based on the cost escalation. Is that why we're? So, I mean, I'm involved in a pretty large project, and what I've seen is that unless you issued a PO, your pricing is not locked in. So, from a cost standpoint, how are you guys controlling that if the project hasn't been really approved to where you're issuing POs to people to say, because it's been my experience, I mean, you got like a 2-week window of, and you're never guaranteed a price unless you give the PO that day for that number.
Yeah.
And then if you don't, I mean, you go back around and it's up 20%.
So, yeah, that's correct. And the 12th is the final day to sign the GMP.
Do they have a guaranteed maximum
Yeah,
price?
yes,
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what we're trying to work through
Right.
right now.
So what's been going on is that over the last couple of months, the Y board, their committee has been meeting weekly. We sit in on most of those meetings with the engineers, with Purcell, going over what can we do here to change design, here to reduce costs. And then based on that final value engineering aspect, they went back and they rebid all the subcontracts to get the best price they could on.
I mean, we've done that too, but when you go around until you actually issue something to procure it,
Yeah.
it's not, your numbers aren't.
Purcell's been,
Right.
We have-
That's why they have a guaranteed price
Yeah.
now until the 12th.
Well, guaranteed
But-
maximum. They can
Right,
spend less. They can't
Yes,
spend more.
right,
So
right.
part of it is, if whatever that number is, that could also be one of our contingencies. If they spend 10% less of the guaranteed maximum,
I'm
maybe
just-
we get 10% of our grant back.
My question is, what are they basing the guaranteed max on? Because they're
Probably the highest price possible with escalation. That's the
Yeah.
Well,
thing is like, to your
Now,
point.
my understanding is, based on what I've seen from the process and not being an expert on this, is that and actually, Rob might be able to say more of this, but they took all those bid prices, they built in some allowances
Mhm.
in case they run into an issue here or an issue there.
That's my issue.
Yeah.
That allowance used to be a predictable number. It's not
Yeah.
predictable now.
But that allowance
Yeah.
might be more than the $880,000 we're talking about, quite frankly, and until you actually place purchase orders, I guess, to John's point.
Right.
The 880 might, but it's a balance sheet thing. They need a promise of,
Yeah.
they've committed that they have to spend up to this amount. They have a shortfall of this amount, and it's quite possible if we discuss and approve a grant,
Yep.
they might be able to negotiate lower POs, and this 880 becomes a null issue. It just falls away. But it's a balance sheet issue. Right now, their balance sheet has a shortfall. I believe, yeah, Paul, go ahead.
Well, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I believe they will probably end up spending less than the guaranteed maximum price, because I don't think anybody's willing to leave money on the table and give a low price and lose money.
Again, I don't know how they're doing it, because I mean, freight alone goes up daily, and I don't know how you can.
That's why, the cost balloon 20%.
Yeah, it's
So-
a tough time right now.
I'd like to go back. The county said no, but the plan that was put in front of the county was for them to use the ARPA funds to come to the LDC or the IDA, whichever entity, and then we were going to pass it through to the Y.
Correct.
And that was legal, correct?
Yes.
So Lisa, when it came to the city, was the opinion that the city couldn't just give the money to the Y? Could the city, to get around their legal opinion, we could accept a donation for economic development services, the LDC, from the city funds to be used?
We'd actually made, the request actually came from the IDA, figuring that that would be more acceptable to the city, and that was just turned them off the way they
Oh.
did it.
So the city opined that, city attorney opined that the city could not give money to the LDC to use for economic development being.
Lisa's gonna, go ahead, Lisa.
So, well, if I recall, I think it was more about what those ARPA funds were intended for. And I thought, if I recall, that it was that he kind of went into more of the definition of what that was supposed to be used for. And that I thought he said that also because the Y is a membership-based organization, that he cited a bunch of different things, and I thought that was one of them, was that it's a membership type organization, so that it only benefits those people who are members of it, not the general public, so to speak. So it was kind of a lengthy opinion, but when you went through the whole thing, you looked at it and said, based on, the face value of it, it was, here's why you can't use the ARPA funds. So
I think the bigger element, as I recall, Lisa, was the basically reading that the city could not use those funds to do anything beyond a traditional city purpose.
Okay.
But there are also,
Right.
and there's some disagreement there, because the county was looking at within that, and I've read through it myself, there's many allowances where it says pandemic relation that, the ARPA funds can be used to support not-for-profits that have been impacted by, various pandemic, which, this cost increase in pandemic. So there's a number of arguments, both sides read the regulations, but the way the legal opinion came forth.
Is this the last item on the agenda?
No, we have the JCIDA ARPA fund agreement. I do have a question. It starts in the IDA, but it can flow back to the LDC as part of backfilling this. We transferred money for the PCB remediation. It looks like we have about 175,000 left based on that balance sheet that's in here. Can that be transferred back to the LDC freely? Because we had already committed to spend that money on PCB remediation, so it's just a different use at the same facility. That's one potential.
Right.
It really just moving money from our IDA agency back to the LDC, and then the LDC, do they have an appetite to maybe come up with another 175? I'm just looking at the 880 and thirds. If the county and the city can contribute something, maybe we can cobble together. The 175 is just moving it from one agency, and we come up with another 175, throw some contingencies in there. Just a unique way of looking at it.
I asked the question because it sounds like this is two agencies each has to have a decision to make something move forward today.
Yeah.
So when we get to the end of the last agenda, and we should probably adjourn this meeting to see how the discussion in the IDA goes, then come back to this if we have.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. After this here, we can go to the IDA. There's only one thing on this ARPA thing. It's actually not even a resolution, it's just a discussion.
Well,
So-
I guess we do, maybe we should just get an agreement that before we walk out of here today, we need to make,
We're gonna ask
yeah.
for, or I'm gonna ask
We're
for a
gonna
roll
solve
call
this.
vote at some
Okay.
point.
Yeah.
So the question is, Lyle, whatever is left over on that PCB, which I think just roughly is about 175K, that can freely be moved back to and taken out of that use back to the LDC.
Yeah.
Because we gave it to the IDA originally, as I recall. Well, LDC.
We
gave
loaned
it
it, we loaned it to the.
Yeah, so there's no issue with that. So I think that is money that we already expected to spend. So that's one way of looking
Good
at
point,
it.
very good point.
And then the question is, do we top that off in doing something? Because I share some of the same concerns Mr. Converse raised. But at the end of the day, I also don't want to see this project for $150,000, $200,000 fall by the wayside, because it's a unique benefit to the community. But we're also, I think we're in the range of $300,000-$400,000, and the Y's looking for $880-ish. So there's still a significant shortfall that other alphabet soups in the community have to
My view of it,
contribute.
I think it's an embarrassment for the city at this point in time not to have committed some skin in the games for this project.
Yeah.
It may be a membership-based project, but that project is going to benefit so much of the downtown. It's not even funny. It's going to benefit the whole city.
Well, I served on the legislature when we did the court facility, and we went through some of the same type of
Yes, we did.
discussions about, was it worth investing money in downtown? Is it going to be a benefit to downtown and the court? There was a lot of negatives about the court facility, and all those negatives were proven wrong, and I think the same would be here too.
Yeah.
So the question is how do we go out and sell if we need to go back to the city and the county?
Well, the problem is I don't know that they can even meet between now and.
Well, that's not the issue. What we're talking about to
They
do
might
is
be able to-
coming up with gap agreement
Right.
for the Y, and then if they become partners later on,
Yeah.
that works too. But I would point out to them that a lot was said about what success would be brought about the court facility, and I support it, and you're well aware, we all got banged up pretty good over that, but it was a great asset to downtown.
Okay.
And we need to sell it the same way that, Watertown is a city center. It is the hub of the city, and as the city goes, so will the rest of the county. And that was the argument we used before, and it's proven right. It's had a big impact on downtown, and this will too. And how do we go about doing that? So
So if
That's
we
why-
can transfer
I
the
think that was an 8-7 vote.
175, we're short, so if we can move that 175, we're short 705,000 to
Yep.
equal that 80.
Right.
And so the 175 is just moving from one account to the
Yeah.
other. We
Right.
expected to
Yep.
spend that, we
Right.
might as
You're
well
right.
spend it
Yep.
for the
Yep.
same
Yep.
purpose, my opinion.
I
The
like
board
to-
can decide.
I'm looking at a lot.
I'm looking at our savings account.
I'm looking that we appropriated $2.6 million last year.
2.6 million. was
And
spent.
we've expended 2.586, so
Okay, I
that
thought
gives
I
me
saw
about
2.4.
14,
Okay, I thought I saw 2.4.
14,000. We're right on.
Okay, so we don't have, maybe I looked at that too quickly, Dave, Paul.
But Ed's wife had an interesting perspective, having been involved.
Well,
Yeah, I'm looking at 2.4. Can we confirm that, Well, 2.425 million is what we spent.
I'm at 2.586 on, you want to pass that over?
You must have a fresher one? I printed this right out of the board packet. Did you? Yeah, it does say 2.586 up there. I wonder why the last page only says 2.45.
Is that a break? So Lyle has some separate,
Separate by vendors, and then
yeah,
there's
he's separated
the,
by vendors and stuff. So it's
Okay.
probably part of.
Yeah, so we do only have 14,000. Good catch, Paul.
Okay.
I was looking at the
Thanks.
last page where it says we've only spent 2.4. So, okay. We have
We,
nothing
we
left.
also have some money in the FTC, JCC, FTC, or whatever the numbers are. We have about 80,000 there
Yeah.
to transfer.
Okay. So between the
So we-
86 there and the
we can-
14, we can cobble together basically 100,000.
And I never finished answering it, John's question about the county. So my sense from what discussed at the meeting, talking to some legislators, hearing through the grapevine is that, there are a lot, just like there is here, there are a lot of legitimate concerns about the project. I mean, some of the legislators felt there were more important purposes. Fair enough. They felt that they put enough in the money for the building. They got that point. Legitimate concerns about why they didn't want to put more. you know, I think from our side, from what we understand, I think despite that, it would still be worth doing, that the pros outweigh those concerns. The concerns were legitimate. I mean, there are a couple in there thinking that, well, what if we fix these walls and they redo them? Well, they're not going to redo the outside shell of the building, but you know, one of the reasons I think it tipped a couple of them was, as Bill said, the city not participating. If we'd had that, I think it could have tipped the scales in our favor. But
Well, I think my concern is if the environment we're living in, this
Yeah.
ever moving costs, there still may need to be a bridge loan even after the project gets down the road and unforeseen costs come up. I mean, they may be having to go to the city or whoever who might help.
I think that whole process, Purcell has been, from what conversations I've had with a couple of directors on the whiteboard, the conversations they've had with Purcell and Purcell's commitment to the project, they've been involved with this from the get-go and with the screw-ups and the engineering and to come up with that contract right now, ready to sign, that's on Purcell. Purcell is willing to commit to that there'll be there aren't gonna be
It's gonna be
tag-ons.
guaranteed.
Yep, guaranteed. So anything on cost overruns that happen after the fact, it's coming out of Purcell Construction's pocket. There's no recourse to come back to any of the entities for additional funding.
That's pretty huge. That's unless they authorize change
Well,
orders.
I would
So I think change
venture,
orders are where they.
Purcell's committed to the project. And you look at the nature of that project from, not that I'm an engineer, but from consultants, probably nobody's gonna make any money on that project when you get all said and done, just because of the unknowns that have already been trying to cover.
I gotta tell you, from what we went through cleaning it up, my Purcell is one that left me with the most confidence out of everyone we dealt with. Purcell, you know, that day we did the walkthrough.
His people.
I think throughout the process, they had our back. I mean, there were things they guided us on.
They gave me a lot of
Costs down.
confidence in what we were doing, so.
So while if we have only about 14,000 left from the PCB remediation and we have 80-something thousand in the other alphabet, C, F, D, C, we have about 100K, so that's a 780 shortfall. It looks like our savings account is like 124. So you're gonna be 400 and something thousand. Unless I'm looking at that number wrong too, which is certainly possible.
If you look at the LDC, we have an RLF loan fund.
Okay,
and-
I was only looking at the savings account, so we can tap into the RLF savings as well.
They are board designated.
Okay, so we have basically closer to 3 million.
We have 3 million.
Okay, I just, that's fair, because I didn't want to strip down other uses.
I want to take just a second to answer Paul's question. You know, how do we get this done? And how do you make people see? From my perspective, we're missing the boat. Find me a higher and best use purpose for that building, no matter what happens down. For us to set on that building, and here again, our carrying cost every month or how much?
14.
Yeah, but that includes balance sheet entries.
No, that's taking out depreciation. That's just looking at.
How are we spending 14,000 a month?
Well, part of that we were spending, we had,
Mine
remember,
wasn't
we
a question.
had to have a staff person on the site to be able to carry insurance in the building.
Utilities.
Well,
Mine
Utilities,
was
insurance.
If we have to carry that building for 2 years, it'll cost us 300,000
We would close.
while
the
we
building.
try and
We would
sell.
close the building up if we had to carry it for 2 years.
Well, but still,
I want
it'll cost.
everyone to look at what's come downtown. You have breweries downtown now, you have businesses coming downtown, malls are dying, the shift nationwide is people coming back to city centers. And this is going to be something that improves the city center, it's going to enhance people coming
Exactly.
downtown. And I think that's something that maybe the city is missing in their negotiations.
It's
And I go
short-sightedness.
back to the court facility, it was a huge success for downtown, despite all the negatives we heard as we went through that. So this is another case along there that we have to get past the negatives and, you know.
My wife just retired from Samaritan. She'd worked there 49 years. In her career, she had recruited over 200 physicians to this community. I can tell you from her perspective, when it comes to recruiting those kind of professionals to the city, the thing they look for, 1, schools, 2, quality of life, but most of them are here to settle for a few years and bringing families. The second thing on their list is, what do you have for a why? The why, consistently. They want to know what the community has for a why. It's a big factor right beside schools. Let's jump to what's going on at the airport right now with Harry. If that build out happens, those are high-tech jobs. People are going to migrate to this community to put down roots and start families, and they're professional people. The ability for downtown Watertown to be revitalized, even residentially, with some townhouse, build outs. I look at the Mercy side, and the why is a part of it. But why is going to feed into what Harry's doing, to feed into what's going on in healthcare, to feed into all the stuff going on in the microbreweries. So we can't let this project get off the tracks because of this setback.
Can we go?
Are you making a motion?
Yeah, I was gonna ask if we can form a resolution or a motion to form a resolution and actually take a vote on doing something. Unless there, I don't want to quell discussion, we can keep going, but.
I really think we should move to the last item on our agenda, adjourn this, because it's got to be a package with an IDA decision. And we really can't form anything unless both agencies come together with a package,
What
correct?
Dave originally started with was a grant from the LDC. This was solely in the LDC.
Right, but Paul's saying, the other part of that we're looking at, do we want to do something on
The lease.
No, I know there's other stuff that we're.
Right,
So
together they
can
get-
we make, if we make a decision on one thing and we can't make a decision on the other, are we just?
So we can make it,
Contingent.
we can make a
Just make it
decision, make it
contingent.
contingent upon
There you go.
the other.
We can just make it contingent and then just kind of carry on. 'Cause
David,
I think there's a lot of contingencies that we shouldn't be the sole agency contributing money to this.
but what about one of the tools in the toolbox is to initially give them the building? Take the $500,000.
That would be an IDA
That's an
project.
IDA discussion. And that's what Paul was trying to say is there's other backfalls or
Okay.
backfills to the LDC, but it's just interagency really. And that's the thing, is like, this should be a joint discussion, but we can't really do it. So I think, Dave, you suggested making a motion. What I was gonna suggest is if we can make a motion to form a resolution as a group to take a vote on, is that what you were gonna make a
Yeah,
motion for? Or just make a motion and make a resolution?
I
don't care.
think your motion is going to be to motion, if you want to identify how much and what conditions.
That's what I wanted to have the group contribute into what the resolution's gonna.
I'll make a motion that we grant up to $400,000 contingent upon the IDA coming on board. And with the, also contingent upon reaching out to the Watertown Trust, other agencies to help offset that.
I'll second it.
Okay, we
And
have a first and a second.
Discussion?
Yeah.
I thought part of our discussion would be if some of these other funds being member items or the tax financing comes available.
It reduces our grant, yes.
We get made whole
Okay.
back from it. Yep. And the Y is in complete agreement with that, the way I understand it, right?
Okay, so
Did you get that,
far,
Peg?
I'm gonna repeat what I heard, 400,000 contingent that the IDA comes on board with the project, and further contingencies that, if all of these other grants and things that Y is waiting for in the future, if they receive this money, won't be spent. Is that fairly summarized what you said, Dave? and
Yes.
Paul? Okay.
How then are we going to account for the shortfall to the Y from the 880?
Well,
We
we
have
have to-
IDA probably will.
So 400 is here, we'll look at the IDA and see what the IDA would do, because on the IDA side, the present agreement is that they would pay us an upfront $500,000 for the rent.
So this is contingent upon that happening?
Yeah, so
Yes.
it's contingent upon the IDA contributing,
Okay.
staying in the
Yeah.
project and contributing, and there's other, I think, greater tools on the IDA side as well. And then the contingencies of all these other tax credits and things if they happen and this money's not spent. Or I would also add in, if the guaranteed maximum price is much higher than what they actually spend, I'm not sure if we want to make that a contingency, like if their project costs are much less. Because I think
I don't
to
think
John's
they're gonna
point,
be.
when you start placing purchase orders.
Not in today's world.
Very unlikely.
They get guaranteed price now. That's
Okay,
gonna be.
no, I just,
much.
they don't want to get stuck turning the
Price, they're
grant
gonna
into
make sure
a
they get it.
That's.
They're gonna hit it.
All right, so we have a first, a second, we've had some discussion and everybody's clear what we're saying yes or no to? Okay, why don't we do a roll call vote? Peggy?
Okay. Ed,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Kent is absent, John,
Yes.
Greg is absent, Paul,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Aiken,
Excuse me, Megan, yes. Oh, sorry.
Rob Eliason.
Yes, sorry about that, Rob.
Okay.
Say Rob A. Well, yeah, Rob A would get both of us, huh?
Rob A.
Say younger Rob and older Rob. It's the only delineation. Okay, so the motion carries with all the contingencies that we've just discussed. So we.
And what fund is that, what line is that coming out of the
Well,
LDC
basically
budget?
savings and our, basically savings, and what we discussed is we can maybe transfer some from,
Transfer the
transfer some
city
from
facilities
CC,
money.
FDC, and the shortfall.
We'll transfer it into savings, so the whole thing will come out of savings.
Okay, and we'll leave that up to,
Just thinking.
we'll leave that up to staff to figure out where the money is coming from. We have other things that we discussed. And
So it's coming.
Lyle, when that PCP fund is closed, you probably would have transferred the money back to the LDC anyway, if there was any left over, or not necessarily? Because it's not a significant amount.
No.
Okay. I know there were suggestions about going right into the IDA, but we have one more item here. Do we want to just knock this off?
Yeah, knock it off.
Because Chris, you said you had to leave 10 minutes ago.
So this agreement, so as you know, the county has allocated almost $4.6 million to JCIDA.
This is page 24 of your packet.
For various programs, you know, as we were talking about earlier, the food resiliency program, the child care program, and others that are listed here. Some of those will be administered through the LDC, so we've got agreement that we'll also need to approve in the IDA meeting, but basically it's it's an agreement between the IDA and the LDC for the LDC to administer a portion of those particular funds.
Did this finally get reviewed by council or not
Yeah,
yet?
yeah.
It did, okay, because mine still says draft. I know this was being looked at.
I'll move the resolution.
Okay, we have a first, second, John's a second. I have a question, page 30 of our packet, there's provisions 6 through 10, which kind of mirror the provisions. I'm not sure if that was a mistake or they're actually more general provisions that belong there. And I don't, that might be a question for council.
Oh,
or-
sorry, no, that's a mistake.
Okay.
That's just got, somehow when I.
Because they're very generic, but they mirror.
No, I must have pasted it twice and then inserted the
Okay.
signature page between.
So page 30 of your packet, which is after the signature, those provisions don't apply.
Right, they're already on page 28.
Okay, so we had a first, a second, we clarified one discussion item. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so this, what is this thing called? Agreement with JCIDA for ARPA funds, from the LDC to the IDA. Okay, any other new business? Not likely. Okay, we have a motion to adjourn the LDC. So moved.
Second.
First and a second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, we stand adjourned. We can move to the IDA. Okay, so privilege of the floor, any new guests? No. Minutes, page 3. We have them, and if, so desired, a motion to accept them.
So move.
Okay, a first, Paul, John, a second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the minutes carried. Treasurer's report, page 7.
Pretty much the same comments about next month. We'll be able to see month to month. The revenues were under projections on a month-to-month basis, mostly due to the amount of pilot sale leaseback fees. Those should be coming up, raising as we start to close on some of the pilot applications we have out there. The operations expenses look in line with budget projections, and our total liabilities and capital is consistent with the previous month. It's a little lower, but not far out of line. The loan fund receivables, standard machine is the only new change, significant change. They're 1 month late on their loan. The others, Cherry Tree, Colleen's Cherry Tree has been delinquent, and so has Taste of Design, which has tried to come up a little bit in their outstanding balance. So it's not bad news, except we have one new loan that's a month delinquent. Other than that, we've been over the remediation total. Lyle says there may be a few invoices sitting out there that may come in late. He's not sure.
Not sure.
And so we're just under the $2.6 million that was allocated by the board. And if there are no questions, I'd move the treasurer's report.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Bill's a second. Any discussion on the treasurer's report? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the treasurer's report carries. Page 16 of our packet, Paul, the alternative energy.
We have not had a meeting since the last report.
Okay. All right, let's see, so that's alternative energy. Loan, let's see, building and grounds.
Building and grounds.
Okay, so we got nothing there. Page 19, the loan review committee. Is that in here? Yeah.
Yes.
Dave,
Yep.
sorry. Drawing a blank here.
You know, one quick comment